Yes.
Could we have 5 minutes near the end of just to ask questions or to have a discussion about what you're talking about?
Sure.
Okay, today mut'ah is more for women, and women need to ask permission. Such rule was put in place for men as well.
Well, this is, I think we dealt with it when last week we were talking about the need for permission. The need for permission is more of a cultural issue rather than a jurisprudential issue. It's to protect the woman, at least this is the basis of it, to protect the woman from harm, particularly in a society that they would, certain physical condition in a woman becomes pertinent and important for them. But if it's to be abused by those who have been given the authority, certainly it can be rejected. And if we can establish that a woman has the intellectual capability, the wisdom to understand what she's putting herself into in the light of the prevailing cultural condition, certainly we can argue that there is no justification for it. But that, I think, at the end of the concept of freedom or the free will in Islam that I explained, there was no clear jurisprudential issue that would limit the absolute freedom that the faith gives to both parties. Mm-hmm. It's what we call externalities or external conditions that put limitations on how the conceptual understanding were to be practiced. Mm-hmm. Certain conditions, irrespective of the conceptually being general, when it comes to practical issues, because of the unique culture that exists, then it certainly imposes some limitation as far as the parameters that we talk. But if you look at it purely from free will, both parties are obligated to be, as long as they are wise, they understand and what putting themselves into, they understand the contractual obligation that comes in, there should not be any limitation. If you do not pay attention to it, to these requirements, and then suffer the consequences, it's equally valid. But we live in a society that it has certain requirement when it comes to a girl being married. And we alluded to those last week. If you were to give this freedom, any mistake could lead to the party which will be harmed to be primarily the girl rather than the boy, the feminine. Go ahead.
So, in speaking in terms of jurisprudence, the woman technically does have the right. Is that what I want to make sure I understand what you're saying?
From the original general ideas, this right is given as long as once we come to the condition under what condition these were developed. If they find themselves under that condition, then whether it's male or female, they have the right to enter into such contract. That's conceptually. Mm-hmm. However, there are a number of ahadith, for example, which I was going to allude to them when we come to the practical aspect of it. This is a point which I talked about just earlier. Mm-hmm. As soon as we open the door to question, the practicality comes before the conceptual development, mm-hmm. And then the whole thing becomes confused. If we look from our own Islamic sources, when it comes to, the mut'ah itself, or sometimes other types of different style written, can be developed into 4 different categories. Linguistically, what does it mean in Arabic, mut'ah? There are a number of verses in the Holy Quran that refers to istimta, which is the same root. Literally, it means to benefit. That's linguistically. When we talk about the etymology, where it comes from, what's the root, how it has developed, it literally means to benefit. There is also the jurisprudential meaning of it that defines this benefit into a unique category. There is also the theological concept which is associated with this. When we come to develop the jurisprudential issue, if it was permissible, who has the right to limit it? Then this moves from juristic into theological. The fourth is what we call the political. What is being used at the moment in the debate between Shia and Sunni is a political concept. Because if we were to return to the jurisprudential part, there is a clear basis for this, and recorded by the Sunni schools of thoughts, Sahih Muslim, Sahih Bukhari, and there are a number of other Sahih, clearly talking about the application, the permissibility during the life of the Holy Prophet. However, jurists like Zamakhshari and others have come back and said the original verse was somehow negated. That's the view which Shia counters that you can't use a verse from the Holy Quran that was revealed in Medina and say it was negated by a verse that was already been revealed in Mecca, by Surah Al-Mu'minun or something else. It doesn't make sense. So what is happening here is neither the debate about theological basis or the juristic basis. It's a political basis. You use it to bash people with it. Go to those of you who have access to Al-Muraja'at, which is a debate between a Shia scholar, a Lebanese scholar, and a Sunni scholar in Egypt, in Al-Azhar, regarding various issues of debate between Shias and Sunnis. One of them is this one. It's been translated into English. You can go out to alislam.org, you can type in Al-Muraja'at, and the whole book comes. Or you go to Google, put Al-Muraja'at, and there are a number of sources that you can access them. I believe Library Sister, as you were putting books around, did you come across it? I had seen it in the past here. A few years ago when the library was in that room, I sat to do some research. I saw it on the shelf. So Al-Muraja'at has become one of the books that everyone talks about. So you can use it in this issue's debate. So linguistically, it means to benefit. And there are, if you go to Al-Mu'jam al-Mufahras and put in and the root is mata'a, mim ta'in. You go to Mu'jam al-Mufahras, which are the verses of the Holy Quran, listed according to the roots. And you go to Harful Mim, and then Ta and Ain, and there are a number of lists of verses in the Holy Quran that this root, in one way or another, has been used in it. So, mata'a, istamta'tum, mata'akum, and so on, they are all this. From linguistic point of view, it's clear. The debate is not the root, the etymology. The debate is here, the juristic part. From a religious point of view, is there such a ruling, jurisprudential basis, that either allows it or forbids it? If it was allowed, permissible, was it stopped or was it not? To understand this, let's for the time being remove the other two, because we don't need them for our conversation. We're talking conceptually. We have to go back to the basic Islam. We believe Islam is a faith that addresses a number of issues, including the relationship between the two genders. And it cannot ignore or negate one of the most fundamental issues, and which is what we call it, the relationship between male and female. Certainly, we have a number of ahadith that zawaj, marriage, relationship, and so on are clearly defined as essential. To the point that there are a number of sources that clearly indicate that marriage complete at least half of your faith. So this is critical. Now, if we want to look at the number of possible ways in which a male-female relationship can be envisaged, we can either call it a free relationship or a structured. Structured. Free relationship or a structured relationship. Free relationship, that means allow women and men, or male or female, to have any kind of relationship that they want without a clear structure. A structured relationship says no, since these are essential, we need to address. It has to happen. But because we have more fundamental issues, we need to structure them. The fundamental issues that we normally, when you come across, we have the physical, the sociological, and the spiritual. And the spiritual. So the structure has to clear itself, or at least define itself, between physical, sociological, and spiritual. When it comes to physical, it should allow for some kind of a relationship, controlled or otherwise, relationship structured or whatever, between male and female. Go ahead. You pointed.
No, I was just thinking.
Okay. The sociological, what is the ultimate game? In addition to the intimate relationship, the satisfaction of the need of a male and a female, is there a higher value that Islam sees in this relationship, that purely physical relationship is not the main objective? And then if there is such a thing, how these two combined together would help the spiritual dimension? If you go to a free society, which call it materialistic, call it post-enlightenment, whatever, Western or sometimes Eastern, it says no, we shouldn't control, we should allow the two parties to decide for themselves. How, when, in what shape, form, whatever it is the two parties that decides. Because humans are free to decide for themselves. These humans are free to decide for themselves is part of the one structure in the physical relationship. Islam, as a matter of fact, there are a number of ahadith that relies on that. It says that relationships could be developed into two, broadly speaking, categories. A relationship in which both parties simply want to benefit from each other physically. There is a clear, conscious decision by both parties that we are not here to establish an entity that has sociological or spiritual implication. We only want to have a physical relationship. Should we allow this to happen or shouldn't we? Islam has allowed it. But both parties, and this is the concept of the juristic mut'ah that we are debating here. What it says in Islam, two individuals, a man and a woman, decide for themselves, fully conscious, mature, they understand what they are doing, and to structure the whole thing, there is a contractual obligation. Obligation that brings these two individuals together. They can limit that relationship for 6 months, a year, 2, 3, or they can limit it for longer. The purpose could be simply to benefit from each other intimately and then we go our way, or the purpose is premarital an introduction. What the two parties decide, as long as they are mature, conscious, understand the consequences, etc., etc. I mean, you can go and find the list of these various categories as far as the conditions that have to be satisfied by both parties. If somebody enters into a relationship that they don't understand that kind of relationship has to be rejected. It's not acceptable. But so here is what we call it the short, strong, long term. But the structure is such that it's not, permanent, non-permanent, and then permanent. The reason why Islam says this is very critical, this is not. You see it in the narrative of the language that we have in hadith, that those who are exercising it says don't bring a child into this world in such a relationship. Why? Because by definition is unstable. And children need a stable environment to be born into. Don't bring the child. But if it happens, since it is a marriage, according to Islam, within its own contractual obligation, it's still considered to be son, daughters, or children of the two parties. But says, since the nature is non-permanent, don't bring a child into this relationship. The permanent one, it says, yes, we need. Why? Because sociologically, the ultimate goal of creating society is not the intimate relationship. It's that a home structure becomes the miniature structure for, and this has implication as when it comes to the practical part. A miniature structure for what we call the ideal society, the just society on earth. The community, the just community, لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُولَنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْمِيزَانَ لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ. That ultimate justice that are supposed to be implemented in our lives by the society. It only happens when you break it down into miniature scale and you establish that justice within that miniature scale, then collectively that builds the whole sociological structure. Family is the fundamental structure in here, plays a major role. And I'm just saying it regard few of the questions that you asked and Brother Hussein asked. Once we are talking about a permanent relationship, any harm, Brother Hussein, any harm or any act that destabilizes a permanent relationship under the usul al-fiqh is not allowed. Anything. La haraja wa la haraj. La darara wa la darar. These are two of the usul al-fiqh principles. Anything that harms a permanent relationship, that ultimately you are trying to establish higher value, sociological, which is the communal structure, and the spiritual one, anything that harms it is not allowed. And this is why, to avoid this kind of thing, most scholars, they say, well, if you are in a permanent relationship, if you want to enter into any other relationship, you have to ask the permission of your wife. And since nobody would allow this to take place because it's going to be harmful to their psychological as well as spiritual value, then it should not be allowed. Whether people follow it or not, that's a different issue. We are talking at the moment in a conceptual kind of picture. So, from an Islamic point of view, linguistically means to benefit, but it is reduced jurisprudentially into what we call it the benefit that intimate relationship between two individuals specifically is the goal of such a contract. Then we moved into, it is an essential issue. We can either develop it between free and structure. The structured one, physical, purely physical, or physical as part of the three other values. Physical, part of the sociological, and the spiritual collective relationship that Islam wants to have. There are a number of, I'm quickly going, because I know a number of questions exist, so I'm going, there are, the same way that with regard to free will, we said that externalities impose certain conditions. Here, externalities certainly impose certain conditions. If you go to Wasail al-Shia sister, you might be able to find it in Kitab al-Nikah, al-Mut'ah. There are a number of ahadith from the 8th Imam clearly reprimanding his own disciples for committing this in a time in which it's going to reflect negatively on what we call the Shia community and the followers of Ahlul Bayt, and ultimately Ahlul Bayt themselves. Imam Rida in particular tells few of, I saw this online, but if you have it one day probably I can bring it in, tells his own disciple to avoid communication and socialization with few individuals because they are loosely practicing this without realizing the negative consequences that it has on the Shia community, particularly on Ahlul Bayt. And they say the follower of Imam Rida is doing this, or to shun them literally. So external condition, irrespective of how we debate with regard to the jurisprudential issue, makes certain limitation. But since I have talked about the jurisprudential issue, I would like to talk about the theological issue. There are a number of verses. Surah An-Nisa, ayah 24. This is the verse. فَإِذَا اسْتَمْتَعْتُمْ, I'll find it out. مِنْهُنَّ فَآتُوهُنَّ أُجُورَهُنَّ.
Twenty-four, you said?
24, Nisa 24. والمحصنات من النساء بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والمحصنات من النساء إلا ما ملكت أيمانكم كتاب الله عليكم وأحل لكم ما وراء ذلكم أن تبتغوا بأموالكم محصنين غير مسافحين فما استمتعتم منهن فآتوهن أجورهن, which talks about and those that your company benefit from each other's company, then you have to pay the contractual obligation that you have. While istimta' here is being used and refers to the dowry within the context of istimta', while in the Holy Quran, when it comes to permanent marriage, it doesn't use this word, it uses sadaqatuhun, which is a dowry for short term, is totally different from a dowry from long term. Uses the two phrases. This verse is being used by both schools of thought, that certainly it existed. There are a number of ahadith in Sahih Muslim and Sahih Bukhari, irrespective of what we have in Shia sources. By the way, if you want to find out a more expansive argument and ahadith and so on, go to Al-Muraja'at or any other book. You go to alislam.org and just simply put mut'ah and a number of lists and articles. Few years ago, a Japanese lady went to Qom, went to Iran, I think before the revolution, went to Iran, and she studied at University of Tehran and went to Qom, and her master's dissertation was, the thesis was mut'ah. Extremely well written master, and which has looked at from a Shia Sunni point of view, the jurisprudential basis, the linguistic basis, the theological basis, etc., what both parties claim. There is no doubt when we look at the verse in the Holy Quran, the translation, a number of other exegesis that we have both from Shia and Sunni. I think her name, sister, is Murato, something Murato. That's the author of this book. Her thesis, then master thesis, then turned into a book. She published it, and Iran published it, I believe, before the revolution, but certainly they were being used after the revolution. And it's, I believe, on alislam.org. If you go Murato, then her book is there. There is no doubt jurisprudentially that it certainly existed during the life of the Holy Prophet. Theologically, what happened to it still exists, or it was abrogated. The debate between Shia and Sunni are this. Shia says still applies, valid. Sunni says it was abrogated. If you look at Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim and others, certainly there are a number of verses and a hadith that say, yes, during the life of the Holy Prophet it existed. Two views of abrogation. Some people say by Quran, others say by second Khalif. Khalif Umar. Those who claim by Quran, they normally refer to Surah Al-Mu'minun, that clearly defined azwaj, and azwaj does not include this. The response from the Shia is that Mu'minun is a Makki surah, Surah Al-Nisa is a Madani surah. You can't have a Makki surah abrogating this Madani surah. Makki surah are the ones that were revealed before. Something that was revealed before cannot abrogate something that comes after. The view at the moment is this, that the second Khalif abrogated a number of things, including using his own authority, what he considered to be, well, unacceptable. And the famous hadith, mut'atan, ma'rufatan, kanata fi zaman Rasulullah wa ana uharrimuhum. One is the Umrat al-Tamattu, and the second one is this short-term marriage. Umrat al-Tamattu is, again, another issue of debate between Shias and Sunnis. When you go to Hajj, you can go for Umrat al-Tamattu, where you have ihram, and then you go to Hajj, you complete, you do Salat al-Tawaf and Salat al-Nisa, then you break. You come out of ihram, you're getting ready for the 8th, 9th, and 10th to go back into the Hajj. Sunnis would not accept whoever goes into ihram should not come out until after, because according to Hajj Tamattu, the fatwa of second Khalif. This issue was abrogated by the second Khalif. This is a theological issue now. Who has the right? We have a hadith from the Holy Prophet that says, Halalu Muhammadin halalun ila yawm al-qiyamah. Wa haramuhu haramun ila yawm al-qiyamah. At the time of his death, if there was anything considered to be halal and permissible, no one has the right to abrogate it or negate it after. We can certainly limit its parameters because of externalities. We say that it's darar or darar or something haraj, we should not practice it for now, but we cannot say it's abrogated and haram. Do khulafa have the right to negate such a thing? Again, this is Shia-Sunni issue. Shia say no, Sunnis say yes. So when we put all these together, certainly from a Shia jurisprudentially and juristic and the theological perspective, there is no doubt that it is permissible. Now comes the second part. Once the permissibility has been established, we come to the practical, under what circumstances this was developed, why and how it can be practiced. Can somebody that does not fall into that category practice it or not? This is now a totally different thing. You have any questions so far?
Well, it wasn't clear to me during the jurisprudential laws. So if two are married, they can still perform mut'ah?
If the what?
If two people are married?
Certainly not, because the contractual obligation does not allow this to happen. Once, essentially, because of the the nature of the relation, the other one is because of the obligation. This is, we have to define it. Normally, this was done when we look at the hadith that we have about individuals that had no partners. But there was a physical need to have a relationship with the opposite gender for a period. Normally during war or anything else. So number one, the first condition is that both, originally, both were singles. Individuals that had their wives died or husbands died or whatever reason, they entered in this, particularly during the condition of war.
So basically widows?
Yes, there was a huge community, and it happens during the war where men become the one that are killed, and then you have a huge number of women that have, that there is a need because of their age, etc., but they don't want to enter into a permanent relationship. They want to have a temporary relationship with someone else. This is exercising their free will. They decide for themselves. The third part is, now once we look at these issues, can somebody who is married and has access to his partner do such a thing? Jurisprudentially, if you ask any scholar, they say if this act harms the relationship, no.
No makruh or no haram?
No, you cannot do it. Yes. Well, when they say no, that means you cannot do it. Certainly when it harms a permanent relationship, when you have access to your partner, it shouldn't be done. So this no, because, and then they appeal or cite harm, dharar, haraj, haraj means difficulty, etc. So, if you send a fatwa or a istifta to any of your maraja and say that as long as you don't play game with the wording of the fatwa, clearly define the facts. I have access to my partner, there is no problem, can I enter into such a relationship? The answer is either clearly no or ask your partner if she permits. And I don't believe yet to see any partner, any female that has in a permanent relationship with her husband would allow free for all, you can have access to whatever you want.
I think we need to arrange a teaching class for some of the leaders in the community and you give them a lecture.
I think more than anything else, some of the other religious scholars need to be informed because they define
That is what I meant, Maulana. I didn't mention that name, but I said we may need you to
So
teach it.
what we have here, conceptually we have no problem with it. But like a permanent marriage, it was supposed to address a unique situation in which two individuals decide freely that our circumstances is such that we cannot enter into a permanent relationship, or we don't want to enter into a permanent relationship. And we would like, but still, because of the benefit that we get from each other, we can enter into this relationship, a temporary one. The temporary, again, is an arrangement under the contractual obligation that both parties make. A mother has her own income, a single mother has her own income, young, she has children as well. She doesn't want her children to know that she's going to get married. Or a father, a single father doesn't have a partner, he wants to have a partner on an on-off basis, whatever arrangement they make. These are part of what we call the benefit of exercising it. But certainly, when you have permanent relationship, it's going to be harmful. And anything that harms, remember what I mentioned, that in the sociological basis, one of the sociological gain or benefit of the family structure was the establishment of a just society. Just society, small scale, is family. A family cannot establish a just society if itself is not just. And you cannot be just if you ignore your partner or harm your partner. This is the logical argument. We have in usul كل ما حكم به العاقل حكم به الشرع. There should be an affinity between the juristic opinion and human intellect. If we ultimately, sociologically, we want to establish a just society, Islam says family structure is the miniature scale, that you can establish it and then put them together collectively. Imagine this is your social just society, which is made up of, and so on and so forth. These individual units that come together. If this unit fails to be just, certainly the society has failed. And you cannot be just in a small family structure. Remember, the whole mentality has to change. The worldview has to change. In an Islamic point of view, I moves away to give, or gives way to we. The we mentality certainly does not agree with it is my right, because I still see myself as the single unit. This is not the family unit that Islam wants. Islam is pushing you towards the move from I into we. To get to just society, you have to exercise I to we here, and then collectively move into a just society. Hence, you cannot do any other way. Go ahead.
Does the third law pertain to females and males, or just males?
Female issue is a totally different issue. Why females can't do it? It has ramification as far as birth, as ramification, something else. But here, as far as where mainly the challenge lies in our society, most Lebanese here, as soon as you talk to them, it's my right. Without understanding that, yes, it could be your right if you were single, or under some kind of a unique circumstance that you needed to do it. But not certainly when you have your wife next to you and you're living together, you want to be free and do whatever you want. This concept of harm and darar certainly limits the parameters of when it should be exercised.
This is going to sound very naive, so forgive me in advance. But why isn't this condition stated very blatantly in the beginning when you're reading about temporary marriage in the anywhere in any of the books of fatwa? Like it's not mentioned in the very beginning as an important condition.
Sister, the books of fatwa are not books of what we call rational argument. Normally, this kind of argument happens during what we call al-bahth al-kharij, when scholars get together and present the issue, and counter-arguments are presented, hadith are brought, tafsirs are brought, your opinions are somehow limited in scope because of this hadith. But when you ask a particular marja, since his obligation is to say yes, no, is it permissible, not permissible? This is why when Brother Alizadeh said, I said we need to teach the scholars here to actually organize classes for brother. When I was in charge of the family section at the Islamic Center in London, this was part of the 2 weeks intensive course that I gave for prospective partners. We would not officiate any marriage unless they go through this. And once they go through it, there were a number of things that we discussed. This was part of it. the parameters of right and responsibilities were clearly defined. So tomorrow somebody cannot say it is my right. There is no my right. It is our right that you have to care about. So, and unfortunately, some of the problems that we have, because still I and we has not been, the two concepts have not been clearly defined, both parties enter into the relationship with the vague ideas of exactly what are the rights and what are the responsibilities. No, it is not your right anymore. There is no I, there is our right. We have to decide between the two of us. But once we look at it from that lens, then clearly anything that harms is not acceptable. Why don't they do it? That's a different story. But certainly Islamic centers have responsibility to organize classes for at least prospective members. That, I mean, the couple that they are trying to get married. We will not officiate the marriage unless you come and we talk about these.